There's a very big case that is happening right now. Maybe you've heard about it. The Parkland shooting case is going on, and the killer is on trial there. But no, that's not the one that you've heard about, is it? Nobody's watching that. Everybody's watching the Alex Jones trial, and people are saying, "Hey, you need to look at this." And so I did look at it because I do have an interest in it, and I have an interest that goes beyond my relationship with Alex, who I worked for nearly a decade. I think there's some very important things that are happening here, as I've said in the past, and every time I say anything about this, and I've not talked about Sandy Hook before. I have talked about what happened all throughout 2020. I've talked about how Trump was given a pass in 2019 about red flags and about vaccine mandates for kids in school and all the rest of this stuff, and then how much worse it got throughout all of 2020, culminating in the Start the Steal stuff. It kicked off with lies from Steve Pieczenik about how the whole thing had been a sting, and they had blockchain watermark ballots. It was 2 days after the election, and they already sent out National Guard. 20,000 National Guard were arresting people at that moment, on that Thursday, after the election on Tuesday. All of it was laughingly absurd. And I talked to Alex and told him that, but he, first of all, pretended he didn't know, which is an absolute lie. I knew it. He knew it. And then he continued to go, not only continued with Pieczenik, Pieczenik was still on well into February, but he started running the Stop the Steal grift. It was all about audience, and it was all about money. And so when you look at this, and whenever I talk about it, people say, oh, yeah, Alex Jones, he's real. He's the guy who woke me up. Alex is not the same guy he was 10 years ago. Not at all. Not in terms of what he's saying. I've watched him change. And well, I'd say even more than 10 years ago. People keep saying, well, Sandy Hook, the thing was a total hoax. And Alex is being attacked because he's over the target. And he's just the first of many people who are going to lose their due process and juries. None of that is true. We lost our due process and juries a long time ago. As a matter of fact, there was a guy that he cheered for who said, take the guns and do the due process later. I've talked from before I went to work for InfoWars about the loss of jury trials, how outrageous that was, and how we needed to understand jury nullification. As a matter of fact, that's the report that I did when I entered the reporters contest and they hired me. It was on jury nullification because trial by jury was gone then. They're not taking away his jury trial. And when you could see what happened yesterday, you understand that Alex is not defending the First Amendment. He's not defending what he said about Sandy Hook. He's now saying Sandy Hook was 100% real. And even though he is saying that this is politically directed at him, they overruled the jury trial, he lost in multiple states with multiple lawsuits with multiple judges because he refused to comply with documents, discovery. That's a requirement when you're in a case. Somebody somebody sues you and sends you a complaint, a lawsuit. If you don't respond to it, you lose by default. I mean, you have to respond to it and say, no, I disagree and I want a trial. If you don't go through that process, you lose. And then when you go to trial, they say, well, we need to see some documents and so forth. And both sides can do discovery. If you don't produce the documents, you lose. It's just that simple. And that's why he lost all these trials from these various judges in various places. So now this is a trial about what the damages will be. And I told Karen, when I heard them saying, Alex Jones might testify, said a couple of weeks ago, we don't know if he's going to testify or not. His lawyer was saying that. I'm going to let Alex Jones is the one making the calls. And it's like his lawyer is, it's about the 11th or 12th lawyer that he's had from what they say in the reports. But this lawyer that he's got right now, apparently he was picked because he looks good on camera. That's the way Alex typically hires. And he looks like John Edwards, the Breck girl, got the hair. You remember that from the footage that surfaced of John Edwards when satellites were analog, and anybody could pick up a satellite signal, and you get these feeds that were happening during commercial breaks, and he's combing his hair back, and how do I look? There was a famous clip. Well, this guy looks like the Breck girl, John Edwards, and he kind of acts like it in court too. It's just amazing what happened with this guy. But what you now see, because it all kind of blew up yesterday, in the sense that, this whole narrative about they're coming after me because, I'm not getting a jury trial and all the rest of the stuff. I gave them all the information that they wanted. That was what he's saying. I gave them all the information. They took away my right to a jury trial. That all kind of blew up yesterday. And it got a lot worse, because the reason it blew up was they found that Alex had been lying about documents that he had not turned over that were substantial. But bigger than what is happening with Alex Jones, a lot of people are focusing on this because they like Alex or because they hate Alex. But I have to say that his failure to defend the Sandy Hook hoax approach, for all the people who trust Alex, do you understand that he didn't defend any of this? He never used it for discovery. Say, show me the bodies. Exhume the kids. Let's see it. No. He caved on all that stuff a long time ago. But worse than that, anybody can get something wrong. The New York Times gets stuff wrong all the time. And this is a radio show, a live radio show. And, there is, it's very different from if you were doing a newspaper article. All this stuff about, did you vet this person? You vet that person? Well, that's different for newsprint than it is for live radio. Live radio, you get people who are calling in all the time, or you get guests who are calling in. You talk to them, people evaluate their credibility from those aspects and that type of thing. But credentials don't make somebody a truth teller. I mean, just look what's happened with the medical establishment over the last year, for example, or climate issues. Credentials don't mean truth, not by a long shot. But when you look at what was said, I think the most damaging thing is what has usually been done, and that is to make money to get a bigger audience by adding sensational and frequently false details to something like this shooting. There were questions, legitimate questions about this shooting. Mainly, there were a lot of questions about how it was being used for gun control, but they chose to focus on nobody died. And where did that come from? Steve Pieczenik. Steve Pieczenik was saying that as soon as or before Wolfgang Halbig, who is not credible by any means. And so what they wound up doing was running a hoax that has equated false flags with being a hoax. Now everybody believes that every shooting is a false flag and all the false flags are hoaxes, that nobody died. That's what Steve Pieczenik continued to try to sell over and over again. He tried to do it to me after the Vegas shooting, and I cut him off. And I never interviewed him again. It was despicable for him to try to pull that BS on me. And yet InfoWars loved him because they didn't care. They knew he was lying. But and that was in 2017. And they continued to have him on all the time, selling lies. And what they have done is not just damage the First Amendment with a lot of embellishment and things like you can make mistakes. New York Times has made mistakes. New York Times has even won Pulitzer Prizes with a reporter who fabricated the entire series. Washington Post done the same. All of these outlets, people can make mistakes. They can let them run for a very long time. But if you do it and let it run for a long time and you do it with malice, that is not supported by the First Amendment. And to continually say that it is to give fodder to the people who want to censor. And that's what Alex has done to the First Amendment. He's given fodder to the people who want to censor. He's not defending the First Amendment. He's attacking the First Amendment because he's a sloppy liar when he talks about things. And that hurts the First Amendment. It hurts the Second Amendment, too, to say all these shootings, nobody died. Because those lies are now, people see the lie, And they think you're lying about all the rest of the stuff. It contaminates everything. You know, his embellishments are like putting a cockroach in a bread sack. You know, you don't want to eat any of that bread that's in there. And that's what it does. And so consider this. Perhaps the biggest false flag of all. You know, people have said, I forget who came up with the saying, but the devil's most successful trick was to make people think he didn't exist. That might have been C.S. Lewis. The most successful trick that the deep state, the intelligence community, has ever pulled is to get people to think that all false flags are hoaxes. There have been a lot of real false flags. And you have to understand they're willing to kill people. That was what was so outrageous about Operation Northwoods. They were planning on flying buildings so they could have a war with Cuba. They were planning on flying planes into buildings. They were planning on attacking shopping malls with bombs and gunfire. And they were planning on attacking military bases and killing people in all of those scenarios so they could get a war with Cuba. They could blame it on Cuba. You know, they were even going to take, this is in the early 1960s when JFK was president. Part of Operation Northwoods was to take a plane, put it on remote control, fly it out over the ocean, and, have it radio back when there wasn't anybody in it, have it radio back they were under attack from Cubans and that type of thing, and then blow the plane up. They had all kinds of scenarios like that, and JFK fired Limitzer, who was head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He was then transferred to NATO. He was became head of NATO. And, JFK was very angry about Operation Northwoods. And so this guy who, after he goes to NATO, he ran Operation Gladio, one of the biggest false flags. And by the way, that involves Steve Pieczenik as well. By his own admission, and the Italian government found that he was involved in the assassination of Aldo Moro. He was sent there, by the way. Steve Pieczenik, this guy who was supposed to be on our side, who's defending freedom, Steve Pieczenik was a little peon of Henry Kissinger. Henry Kissinger, the godfather of globalists. And you trust this guy? Does Alex not know that? Alex knows that. He's Alex's controller. Daria, who's everybody's familiar with now after the trial. Daria took me aside when I pushed back on the sting and said, Pieczenik has demanded that Alex fire you. I said, does he do what Steve Pieczenik wants? Because I'm not going to shut up about this lie. And nothing happened for about a month. So I thought at that point in time that that wasn't going to be the case. But look, the biggest trick that Satan ever pulled was to make people think he doesn't exist. And the biggest trick that has been pulled on the public is to discredit the real tactic of false flags. So he says it was 100% real. To the people who want to defend all of this dumpster fire that you've been watching on slow motion. So was Alex lying then or lying now if he says it's 100% real? These people want to believe the hoax. No, he interfered with the discovery. Again, presenting himself as a martyr, the loss of due process. None of that was true. It's the ultimate hoax. And as I've said before, because I worked for him, because I was fired, because I refused to lie for him, because I not only refused to lie for him, but I opposed his lies on his network, I'm a disgruntled employee, and I've told people I was disgruntled throughout all of 2020. And I was getting madder by the minute. And by the time they started this steal operation, this grifting operation, I was done. And he told everybody that he fired me because he couldn't afford it. Fired me and Travis a week before Christmas because he couldn't afford it. It came out in the trial yesterday that he made $800,000 in one day. And Alex said, well, you're cherry-picking data. That was in March of 2020. And he said, 2020 was our best year. I've been telling people for the longest time that Mike Adams and Alex Jones, and Alex had Mike on all the time because Mike's hair was on fire talking about the lockdown. And I said my problem with them was for the first 3 months up to that lockdown on Friday the 13th, 2020, the two of them were pushing, we're all going to die because this is a gain-of-function bioengineered thing that's been released and it's coming this way, so buy your storable food. And Alex said, yeah, that was when things were really peaked, March of 2020. He said, we were selling a ton of storable food, our best year ever. And he's now got about 60% more employees than he did when I was there. But he fired me for the money. He actually, he had other people fire me, and while they were firing me, he told the audience that he had to let me go because he didn't have any money. And then things got nasty because he started defaming me publicly like he did the Sandy Hook families. And I called him on that and text messages to him. And so now the opposing counsel has my text messages and calls to him about that kind of stuff. He not only fired me, but privately he threatened me and my family. I'm not going to cover up for this guy. He is a monster, and he has a huge effect. Everybody is paying attention to his trial. He's presenting himself as a martyr. He's not a martyr. You got people who have committed suicide, many more people who have had their lives ruined because of his Start the Steal grift. He made a lot of money off of that. He got a big audience off of that. And look at the lives that he destroyed. He did much more destruction with that Start the Steal stuff than he ever did with Sandy Hook. Much more. It was despicable. I wasn't going to go along with one element of that, frankly. So, Scarlett Lewis, the mother, there's just two people in this particular trial. There's 3 different lawsuits. In this lawsuit, there's just 2 plaintiffs. And so Scarlett Lewis, the mother, says, it seems so incredible to me that we have to do this, that we have to implore you, to punish you, to get you to stop lying. And I told Karen, I said, if he gets on the stand, he will commit perjury. Well, this is what's happened now. His lawyer, his Breck Girl lawyer, accidentally sent 2 years worth of texts from Alex's phone to the plaintiff's lawyers. And yesterday on the stand, there was this confrontation where Mark Bankston, attorney for the plaintiff, said, did you know that 12 days ago your attorneys messed up and sent me an entire digital copy of your entire cell phone with every text message that you've sent for the past 2 years? And when informed, they did not take any steps to identify it as privileged or protected in any way? You say they didn't just send it and forget about it. They informed them. You sent this to us. They didn't do anything to protect it. That's how incompetent his Breck Girl is. Unbelievable. just unbelievable. You have a period of time if you do something like that, because I did it evidently by mistake. You can claim privilege, client-attorney privilege. You can't use that in court. Sorry. It's too late. They've seen it, but they can't use it in court. It can be excluded. They didn't even bother to do that. So we told them, hey, you sent us all of Alex Jones's phone for the last 2 years. They didn't do anything. Alex responded, this is your Perry Mason moment. Never were truer words said. That's the most true thing that Alex said. Bankston continued. He said, in discovery, you were asked if you had Sandy Hook text messages on your phone, and you said no. Is that correct? You said that under oath. And Jones said, if I was mistaken, I was mistaken. You got the text messages right there. Bankston says, you know what perjury is, right? I just want to make sure before we go any further, you testified under oath that you personally searched your phone for the phrase Sandy Hook and said there were no messages, and you lied. No, I did not lie, says Jones. Now, this article says previously Jones testified that he did not use email. so he would not be providing any email during discovery. However, Bankston also stunned Jones by displaying his emails as evidence, which came from Jones's phone. So he says, I don't have any text messages about Sandy Hook, but he did. He says, I don't even get an email, but he did. He said, you'd agree these are emails sent to your lawyers, your staff, and others concerning your business operations, Sandy Hook, and other topics? Jones responded, this is ridiculous. Yeah, it is ridiculous. Maybe he should have used Owen's line. I just don't know what to say about that. That's what Owen always says. Jones testified on Wednesday that InfoWars regularly brought in as much as $200,000 a day, and that it had grossed as much as $800,000 a day at times. The exchange came after Bankston mentioned Jones's claims that his income had virtually disappeared in recent years. Have we heard that over and over again? Without your, buying my stuff, we're going to disappear, he says. Bankston asked Jones if he remembered saying on his show that the mass shooting at Parkland, Florida, was a false flag engineered to start a civil war. He answered, I said I believed that it could be. And then the Las Vegas shooting there at the concert, is that a false flag, government operation, right? He said, now a lot of people have got questions about Vegas, said Jones. And of course, that was Pachinik who tried to set up Nobody Died at Vegas. I mean, I went in and told Rob Dew, I said, you heard what this guy just did. I said, he came in late, and then he tried to sandbag me on that. I said, I don't believe that. That's not true. I've already talked to people. People did die there. But he tried to set me up the way that he had already set up Alex and the rest of InfoWars. And I said, take that off. I don't want that posted anywhere. And I said, and you guys better not have Pachinik on again. And that was October 2017. But they did it anyway. They're like moths drawn to the fire. They're drawn to the audience. They're drawn to the money, because that's what it's about for them. That and nothing else. So he said, would you agree with me that there's not a mass tragedy, mass bombing, mass shooting that has occurred in America in the last 15 years that you have not attached the words false flag to? Jones said no. Bankston then played footage of Jones calling Sandy Hook a concocted scheme by government that is synthetic, completely fake, that type of thing. But look, the biggest false flag is to destroy the term false flag, which is what he's done. And he's misled people about key issues after the other. And he's destroyed many lives. Many more lives were destroyed with this January the 6th, start the steal stuff. So where is it now? Well, it's gone from bad to worse. As Insider.com talked to some lawyers, they said Alex Jones's legal prospects went from bad to very bad in court on Wednesday. The digital copy of Jones's phone that was shared with lawyers for Sandy Hook parents included a text about the massacre that Jones previously claimed the text did not exist, as well as financial information that he refused to turn over during deposition, and emails that he testified that he didn't have. This is a bad day for Jones in court, said Matthew Barhoma, a criminal appeals attorney. He said it's a bad reflection as to his character and credibility, which is especially on the line when you're on the stand. If the jurors believe Alex Jones has lied about the texts, they're free to reject everything that he's saying, which is huge. Legal experts told Insider that Jones undeniably opened himself up to potential perjury charges as a result of his lawyer's error. That's a criminal charge. This is civil. This is about money. But now we're talking about a criminal charge. If Jones did lie about the existence of text messages referring to the shooting, the court would consider it perjury. One lawyer they talked to, Barhoma, says that's a verification that you made under oath. And if it turns out later, which so happened here, if it turns out later that it's not true, that there are responsive text messages, that there are responsive communications that should have been produced, that's why he lost in 3 different lawsuits, 2 different states, 2 different judges, because he refused to produce anything. They knew that he was keeping this stuff back. And now it's been proven. And it's been proven by exposing his perjury. So it seems like bad faith, and that is actionable. Prosecutors in Texas will ultimately make the final decision on whether or not Jones should be charged. If Travis County District Court Judge Gamble, the one who's presiding over this trial, who admonished Jones several times during his testimony earlier this week, was to make a referral in the case. Well, that's putting it mildly. I mean, they had pictures where cartoon-like pictures that were being done on InfoWars, where they showed the two judges on either side of Jones, and they showed them lit on fire. It's inflammatory rhetoric, at least, right? So if she were to make this lady that he is accusing of pretty much everything, if she were to make a referral to the case, the lawyer said prosecutors would be even more likely to pursue a criminal case against Jones. If the referral happens from the judge, he said, it's very, very likely that Alex Jones will be prosecuted, said the lawyer. Even if it doesn't, I think this is such an outrageous lie that it's a very easy perjury case that I would expect Texas prosecutors to pick up. So what are we talking about here? That's a crime. Is it a misdemeanor or a felony? Well, perjury can be either. And in this article from Insider, they lay it out. They say the crime of perjury in Texas can either be classified as simple perjury, a misdemeanor, punishable by up to a year in jail, or aggravated perjury, a felony that is punishable by 2 to 10 years behind bars. In order to be considered aggravated perjury, 2 elements have to be present, said the lawyer that they're talking to, Romani. He said the perjury must take place during an official proceeding, such as a trial, and the perjury must be material, meaning the false statement could reasonably affect the outcome of the official proceeding. Both elements for aggravated perjury and the possible decade-long jail sentence that comes along with it would seemingly be met in this instance, Romani said. Jones's legal team's mistake set the internet aflame on Wednesday, but Romani said it's a gaffe that he's seen happen many times on account of human error. He's even been on the receiving end of such a mistake, he said. It happens when you're sending so many emails. You're regularly communicating with your opposing counsel. When you're dealing with lots of text messages, it just happens. Well, that's the problem. It is very difficult to be a good liar. You need to have a really good memory, and you need to control your documents. Maybe the best thing to do is just to tell the truth. The common man. They created Common Core to dumb down our children. They created Common Pass to track and control us. Their Commons Project to make sure the commoners own nothing. And the communist future. They see the common man as simple, unsophisticated, ordinary. But each of us has worth and dignity, created in the image of God. That is what we have in common. That is what they want to take away. Their most powerful weapons are isolation, deception, intimidation. They desire to know everything about us while they hide everything from us. It's time to turn that around and expose what they want to hide. Please share the information and links you'll find at thedavidknightshow.com. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sharing. If you can't support us financially, please keep us in your prayers. thedavidknightshow.com.